There are men who walk into a room and something shifts without them doing anything. There are men who never raise their voice and yet are never argued with. There are men who get what they want without performing for it. And then there are men who do everything right and get moved anyway. The difference is not intelligence. It is not appearance. It is not how hard they work or how agreeable they are. Carl Jung mapped the difference in 1938. Almost no one understood what he was actually saying. You are about to. Jung spent his life mapping the unconscious, the hidden architecture of every human mind, and what he found in every man he studied was a reservoir of force that had been systematically sealed off. He called it the shadow. Not your evil, not your worst self. That is the misreading that has turned his work into self-help content. The shadow is every part of you that was trained out of existence before you were old enough to refuse the training. Your aggression, your hunger, your refusal to be managed. The part of you that wanted to fight back and was told that was wrong. The part of you that wanted more and was told that was greedy. The part of you that refused to be small and was told that was arrogance. They did not remove those parts of you. They buried them. And what is buried does not disappear. There are 7 things Jung understood about the shadow that every man watching this needs to hear. I am going to take you through all of them. Point 5 is the one that will change how you understand every time you have been controlled without knowing it. I will come back to it. Stay with me. Most people who have heard the term assume the shadow is the dark part of them, the violent impulse, the selfish desire, the thing that makes them ashamed. That is not what Jung meant. Jung defined the shadow as everything outside the light of your consciousness, everything you cannot see about yourself, and critically, everything your particular environment decided was unacceptable. In a household that punished anger, your capacity for anger becomes shadow. In a society that calls ambition arrogance, your hunger for power becomes shadow. In a world that rewards compliance, your refusal to comply becomes shadow. The shadow is not a monster. It is a vault. And inside that vault is everything that was put there, not because it was destructive, but because it made the people around you uncomfortable. Jung wrote that everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. The parts of you that you refused to acknowledge did not fade. They compacted. They became dense. They became pressure. The man who was told his anger was wrong does not become a man without anger. He becomes a man with compressed anger that leaks sideways, erupts at the wrong moment, or turns inward and destroys him quietly. The shadow was not the problem. The refusal to look at it was. It happened before you had the language to question it. You were praised when you were agreeable. You were punished when you were loud, defiant, hungry, or raw. The adults around you were not evil. They were passing down the same program that was passed to them. Suppress what makes people uncomfortable. Display what earns approval. Repeat until it becomes automatic. By the time you were 10, you had already learned which parts of yourself were safe to show. You had already begun to perform. The performance did not feel like a performance. It felt like who you were. That is the mechanism. The mask becomes the face. The persona, Jung's term for the social self you constructed, becomes so familiar that you forget there is anything behind it. but behind it is everything they told you to put away. Machiavelli wrote about men who performed virtue so completely they forgot they were performing. When real pressure arrived, they had no reserves. No lion, only fox. He said it directly. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. You need both. The training tried to give you only a fox, a careful, calculating, approval-seeking creature who survives by being inoffensive. What happened to your lion is the story of your shadow. Stop. You have been reading this as psychology. Start reading it as strategy. You know this man. You may be this man. He is agreeable. He never raises his voice. He does what is asked without complaint. He does not ask for more than he is given. He is, by every external measure, easy to be around. He is also easy to use. The shadow does not leave when you bury it. It finds other exits. In this man it leaks his chronic resentment he calls stress. It leaks his passive refusal he calls being busy. It leaks his quiet contempt he never admits to. And sometimes, after years of compression, it erupts in a single moment that bewilders everyone around him, including himself. He did not know he was angry. He had been angry for 15 years. The people who got what they wanted from him did not notice any of this. They noticed that he never said no. They noticed that his compliance was consistent. They came back. They brought more, he gave it. This is not a character flaw. It is a structural problem. The man who cannot access his own aggression cannot defend himself. The man who cannot access his own desire cannot negotiate. The man who cannot access his own darkness cannot recognize it approaching from the outside. The buried shadow does not protect you. It leaves you open. The person who exploits the agreeable man does not see a good man. They see an unlocked door. Jung called this projection. It is one of the most consistent mechanisms in human psychology, and one of the most strategically significant things you can understand about the people around you. When a man cannot acknowledge his own hunger for status, he sees status seeking everywhere else. When a man cannot acknowledge his own capacity for deception, he sees deceivers in everyone. When a man cannot acknowledge his own rage, he is triggered by any expression of it in others. Projection is how buried material returns. It returns as perception. You see in the world what you refuse to see in yourself. This matters to you strategically for one specific reason. The things that provoke you most intensely are a map to your own shadow. Not always, not perfectly, but consistently enough that it is worth paying attention to. When someone makes you angry in a way that feels disproportionate, the question worth asking is not what is wrong with them. It is what they activated in you that you have not looked at. The man who understands his own shadow can observe his reactions without being run by them. He sees the provocation and asks what it is pointing at. The man who does not understand his shadow is at the mercy of his own buried material. He thinks he is responding to the world. He is responding to himself. That distinction is the difference between a man who watches a battle from the hill and a man who is already inside one. Here's what changes everything. Every man who gets controlled has the same vulnerability. It is not weakness. It is not stupidity. It is unowned shadow. Here is the mechanism. The things you have not acknowledged in yourself cannot be protected by your conscious mind. You cannot defend a territory you do not know you own. If you do not know that your anger exists, anyone who knows how to trigger it owns your anger. They pull the lever. You erupt. They step back and watch you hand them exactly what they needed. If you do not know that your hunger for recognition exists, anyone who offers validation can lead you anywhere they want. The flattery lands in a place you cannot see coming. You follow it without understanding why. If you do not know that your fear of being left out exists, anyone who creates distance can stop you from doing anything. The threat does not even have to be stated. They create space. You capitulate. Your unexamined shadow is not a private problem. It is public leverage. It is the handle by which other people lift and move you. Jung understood this. Machiavelli understood this from the opposite angle. A strategist does not wait to discover his vulnerabilities in the field. He maps them in advance. He knows where he can be hit before the opponent does. The man who knows his darkness cannot be ambushed by it. He sees the trigger approaching. He decides what to do with it. Not anymore. There is a version of this conversation that turns into therapy. That is not this conversation. What Jung described as individuation, the process of confronting and integrating the shadow, Machiavelli would have called intelligence work. You do not examine the shadow to become peaceful. You examine it to become unreadable. The strategic man does not suppress his ferocity. He knows exactly where it lives. He knows what triggers it. He knows how to call it when it serves him and how to keep it still when it does not. He has a lion. He chooses when the lion moves. This is not passive restraint. This is precision. The man who has looked at his shadow has one capability the untrained man does not. He cannot be surprised by himself. When someone tries to provoke him, he sees the mechanism. When someone tries to flatter him, he sees the play. When someone threatens what he values, he responds with decision instead of reaction. You cannot be moved by what you already understand. That is the strategic value of this work, not peace. Precision. Before the final point, what I am about to describe is not an endpoint. It is a direction. A man with a direction arrives somewhere. A man pointed nowhere stays. You have seen both of them. You may have been both of them. The first man has never looked at his shadow. He does not know he has not looked. He believes he is simply who he is. He is consistently surprised by his own reactions. He is consistently frustrated by how often things escalate beyond what he intended. He does not see the pattern because the pattern is inside him. He loses the same ground repeatedly and blames the circumstances. The second man has done the inventory. He knows what moves him. He knows what threatens him. He knows what he wants and has stopped pretending he does not. He does not perform virtue he does not have. He does not hide power he does not need to hide. He is not better in the moral sense. He is more dangerous in the strategic sense. He is harder to control because he is harder to surprise. He is harder to provoke because he already knows where his anger lives. He spoke to it. It is not waiting to ambush him in public. He is harder to flatter because he already knows what he wants. No one can offer him something he has already given himself. He is harder to threaten because he has already faced his fear of loss. Whatever you take, he is sat with the version of himself who has nothing. That man does not break. He chose this. You can. Go back to the first question. Why do some men command without performing? Why do others spend their lives being moved by forces they never identify? The answer is always the same. The man who has looked at what he actually is cannot be managed by someone else's story of what he should be. His shadow is not running loose. It is not buried. It is known, directed, owned. Jung identified it. Machiavelli built his philosophy around knowing your own nature before anyone else does. The unexamined man belongs to whoever finds his blind spots first. Comment the word shadow if this reached something in you that you already knew was there. Subscribe to Machiavelli's Strategy Code. New strategy every week for men who are done being moved and ready to start moving.